Pulling the Trigger is brought to you by Easy Vape North Shore, the industry's leading direct retailer of the highest quality personal vaporizers, e-cigs, vapes, and Canadian-made e-juice. Located at 987 Marine Drive in North Vancouver, or you can check them out online at www.easyvapecanada.com. You can also donate to my Patreon account at www.patreon.com/MarkHughesComic. What are you doing, buddy? You like my backpack? What's going on? Okay, there you go. Well, hello. Welcome to Pulling the Trigger. I'm Mark Hughes, and this is my podcast. As always, edited, produced, posted, and curated by the wonderful Taylor Murray. Pulling the Trigger is sponsored by our friends at Jackal Events. Jackal Events is a Vancouver-based event organization company specializing in political events and comedy shows. Comedy stuff, if you want to catch me, I'm going to be at the London Fringe Festival, London, Ontario, May 29th to June 10th is the date of the festival. I'll also be in Nanaimo Fringe Festival in August. Tickets can be purchased for the London Fringe Festival at the London Fringe. If you just Google it, you can find it fairly easily. And the next comedy shocker will be July 7th at the Rickshaw event. Details to come, announcement date soon. And you can buy tickets at www.comedyshocker.com. Well, it's been an interesting couple days for me. There was something I was thinking about that I wanted to talk about that was in my personal life, and then, as it always happens, as soon as I get to recording, I can't remember what it was. What the fuck was it? Something I've been talking about a lot lately in my own personal life. Oh, comedy and how it's affected by... Well, recently there was a show in Toronto called White Guys Matter, and it was put on at the Toronto Yuck Yucks, and there was a lot of controversy surrounding it. Even comics were asking, or were campaigning to have the show shut down, and I have to admit, I do not agree with that at all. I think that's where we're crossing lines. I think as comics, you might not like a show, but when it's satirical like that, I don't think we should be we should be trying to get each other's shows shut down, because where does the line get drawn? Maybe I don't like certain shows to do with certain subjects that that affect me. There's shows that talk about drugs and drug use and things like that. Maybe I should campaign as a recovering addict to get those shut down, because I think they perpetuate a drug culture, and especially with all this opioid epidemic and overdoses, and me knowing so many people who are dying, it really bothers me, and I think these shows spit in the face. See how ridiculous that sounds? Fuck off, man. And yeah, I'm probably going to make some enemies by saying that, but I don't care. It's like, don't like it, that's fine. Disapprove of it, fine. Maybe even voice your disapproval of it, but to try and get the show taken down as a comic, no. So let the hate begin. That's about all I have to say. Everything's pretty good in my life. All three ferrets are awake right now. Oh no, Goku just went back to sleep. I got paid for a show that I did a couple months ago, and I was beginning to worry that I wasn't going to get paid for it. I remember at one time the person said when they handed me the form I had to fill out to get paid, "Oh, don't worry, this X organization has the money. You will get paid." And I thought it was suspicious that they said that. But anyway, it took about a month and a half, almost 2 months to get paid, but now I got paid. So, today's episode, we've all heard of what's been going on in the hashtag #MeToo movement online, and executives in Hollywood and Harvey Weinstein and sexual assault, and people coming forward with their sexual assault stories and sexual abuse stories, sexual harassment stories. One thing we haven't heard a lot of is women being accused of it. Today, our guest is a woman who did a show, a nationally touring show called Rape is Real and Everywhere. I'll let her explain it further in the episode. And she put it on because she's a survivor or victim or former victim of a sexual assault. And she wanted to do a comedy show about it. Again, I'll let her elaborate on that. And just recently, she was accused of sexual assault. Kind of a confusing little quagmire that is, isn't it? I had the honor and privilege of having her tell her story here today, and I have to say, balls of steel to be able to do that. That takes a lot. There could very well likely be social repercussions for it. I will say this. A woman coming forward and saying she is a woman admitting to sexual abuse or sexual violence and taking ownership and responsibility for it is very admirable, and I don't want to take away from that. But I will say that I don't believe the social consequences are quite as bad. A lot of men are probably thinking, what's the big deal? Sexually assaulted by a woman, especially an attractive woman, what's wrong with that? That sounds great. A lot of people don't think women can be offenders, even if they are offenders. Our criminal justice system is set up in such a way where a lot of the time women are treated as victims even when they've committed a crime. So it's kind of like this mirror image or reverse sexism kind of thing. So and this is just me talking right now. This is my opinion, and it's. I think this is the beginning of conversations. I hate that word, but whatever. That need to start. That men can in fact be victims of sexual violence. That women can in fact be offenders. Should the social consequences be separate? I don't know. We live in a world where there are double standards and there's no way around it, and that's just the world we live in. And I just try and operate from a position of I live in the world I'm in. Ideals and ideology and all that are nice, but I have to deal with day to day. And in this day to day, things are different for men as they are for women. You'll even hear at one point when Heather was sharing with some of her feminist friends how their knee-jerk reaction was quite similar to what you hear men saying when a woman has accused them or a man they know of sexual violence. I think this was one of the better interviews I've ever done on this show. I think we covered a lot of ground. Again, for someone to take the responsibility to come forward and to admit as best they can to what they did without blaming anyone or finger pointing, I think we can learn a lot from that. Heather Jordan Ross. You met my ferret. She went in your bag.
Yeah, she went in my bag.
Did she seem fascinated by anything?
There's a mesh part of my bag, so she definitely was popping her nose in and out of there, being like, "What are you trying to hide, bitch?"
Right, and she probably would have even ripped it apart. They tend to.
Whoa.
Yeah, they. This is actually a couch that had another part that went along the wall here.
Oh no.
They burrowed into it.
No.
Yeah, and were sleeping in it, but they were also pooping in it, which was the part that was bugging.
Oh, no.
Yeah, so I was like, now I have to get rid of it. So this part is okay. But they'll probably get in there one day, but when I move, I'm just going to toss the couch out.
Do ferrets burrow?
They do. They will go, if they can find anything so they can actually sort of sense if something's hollow, and then they'll, like my box spring puppy, my new guy, he could tell it was, why is the sound so strong? There we go. He could tell that it was hollow, and it took him 2 months of digging at the box spring, and he finally got a hole in it.
Wow.
Yeah, then same thing. They were sleeping in there, but also pooping in there, and I had to get rid of the box spring.
Oh, no. Where do ferrets actually exist naturally?
Okay, funny question, or fun answer. The animal that ferrets are domesticated from no longer exists in the wild.
Whoa.
So they think it's either an extinct animal or a hybrid of some kind.
Wow.
Yeah. There's an animal in the States called the black-footed ferret, but if you put the two side by each, they don't even look, they're not the same animal, you can tell.
Wow.
Yeah. And ferrets they've been domesticated for a very long time, few thousand years at least. They're used for hunting smaller animals.
Okay.
And the Eiffel Tower actually has a ferret history connected to it. There's wiring underground. They used ferrets to do the wiring, so they'd hook some wires up to the ferrets and then send them through the tunnels or whatever. Yeah.
That's amazing.
Yeah. And ferrets are still used for hunting in certain countries, hunting rabbits and stuff like that.
Wow.
Yeah.
Very, very interesting.
And, here's another fun fact. They do a lot of drug testing on ferrets because apparently they have a similar immune system to us.
Oh, really?
So if I get
Really?
sick, my ferrets can get sick and vice versa. They can
No
catch
way.
the same diseases that we can. It's almost an identical immune system.
Wow, that's extremely interesting.
A vet was telling me that the only reason we know anything at all about ferrets, because they're not an animal that a lot of research goes into because there's not as much money in it like a dog or a cat.
Mm-hmm.
The only reason we know anything at all about ferrets is from all the research they've done with their drug testing.
Wow.
It's kind of shitty because they intentionally infect them with things and then test the drugs on them.
Yes, yeah, they do that with a lot of
Yeah, I mean,
different
ferrets
dudes.
aren't alone on that one.
I had a friend who had to give rats cancer, which is like pretty...
Had to give them cancer.
She had
How
to
do you
give-
give an animal cancer?
Just stick something in there.
Right.
People do it all the time. That's how they cure cancer for people. They give cancer to animals. Literally, that's what they have to do. And
Right.
then she would put them down.
Wow.
Which is like crazy.
So, welcome everybody. We're joined by Heather Jordan Ross today. And Heather Jordan Ross is well, I guess technically right now you're a local comedian because you're in Vancouver.
Yes,
For the time being, anyway.
for another 2 weeks.
Yeah, for another 2 weeks. And I met Heather a few years ago doing comedy and stand-up comedy in Vancouver. And Heather did a show that was called Rape is Real and Everywhere. Do you want to describe it?
Yeah, Rape is Real and Everywhere was called Rape Jokes by Survivors, and it was all professional stand-up comedians that were also survivors of sexual assault, and all of our shows were on the topic of sexual assault. And we did our first few shows in Vancouver. We did 3 sold-out shows, and then we decided, even though the venue was only 50 people, that was enough to do a national tour, so we did a national tour as well.
Right. And rape jokes are these are all questions you've been asked 8 million times, I know, but like, I think the unusual thing about Rape is Real and Ever, which I was on, I was one of the males on the first one,
Yeah,
is
and
that...
you did a very good job.
Oh, thank you. Is rape jokes are like the ultimate taboo in comedy. They're the kind of go-to when people say, are there any topics that are off limits in comedy?
Absolutely.
And definitely the unusual thing about Rape is Real and Everywhere is that there were jokes being told by survivors of rape.
Yeah,
right?
and I think that the thing is that the people usually telling rape jokes are people that have no idea what they're talking about. So when you get a survivor who actually knows the in and out of what it's like to experience sexual assault, talking about those details that you never hear anybody talk about at all, and being able to relate to be able to relate to that person is just it's a totally different experience.
And what I know the story is that basically you and Emma's been on this show, so she told some of the story, but for the listeners who may not have heard Emma, and also it was in some ways you were more the catalyst for it than it was sort of almost Emma's idea, but you were an experience you had was sort of the rape was a muse for this show.
Yes, exactly. It was my assault that kind of got the ball rolling because I had just reported my sexual assault. And then literally that week I was talking to Emma about how I wanted to be telling rape jokes, but I couldn't go out to open mics because I didn't want to hear rape jokes, and I was having this real unique experience. And then I can't remember if she or I said it, but what if we had a show that was only survivors as a joke? And then literally we decided that night. So it was, despite the fact that I had the more convenient rape, it was definitely a joint effort from then on out, for sure.
Right. And it was nationally touring. And for any of our listeners who want to know more about it, you just Google Rape is Real and Everywhere, and you can get a whole bunch of information about it. Yeah.
And Google Comedy and Google Comedy Show, because sometimes if you just type in Rape is Real and Everywhere, you just get a bunch of super sad articles instead.
Yeah,
Put
we
my
want the
name
happy
in,
ones.
like Heather Jordan Ross, put that in with it, or Emma Cooper, and then you'll get the right thing.
Right.
For real.
And you'll get all the stories about the different cities that the shows happened in. And from the sounds of it, I Googled it yesterday, and it was a success in all the articles I read.
Yeah,
and you know
absolutely.
what I looked for? I looked for angry comments on all the articles, and I only ever saw one.
No, this is the hilarious thing. I think we got like 3 bad responses. One woman sent us an email and said, when we were about to do Halifax, she's like, what if you were raped on the steps of Dalhousie? Would that make a difference? And I was like, what? No. What? And she said that I was like shaming Rehtaeh Parsons. And I was like,
Who's that?
Rehtaeh Parsons is the girl that killed herself after she was raped and people shared pictures of it.
Oh, shitty.
Super shitty. And I was like, if anything, if Rehtaeh Parsons got to just talk about it, I think she'd still be alive. So no. Anyway, yeah, we were waiting for the backlash. The worst thing that's happened is that someone found an old video of mine and commented meh. So that's like Canada for you and their extreme cruelty.
That would hurt me more than someone calling me like
I
something,
know,
right?
yeah.
Like you're not funny is worse than racist or homophobic or anything for me.
Yeah. Yeah.
I work so hard at my racism and homophobia and the jokes. And that was I was thinking of something is so the overall I remember what it was. What would you say the typical demographic was of the people who came to the shows?
There was no typical demographic.
Okay.
Absolutely not. We got gaggles of middle-aged ladies being like, this sounds weird. And we got like young hippie dudes being like, what the hell's going on, man? And we got survivors and we got middle-aged dudes and we just got everybody, every color, everything. Yeah.
I remember I was in a Vice article about the show, and the Vice's take on it was that it had male performers.
Yeah, absolutely.
And you pretty well had male performers in every province that you did the show in, didn't you?
I think there was only one show we didn't have a male survivor in, and it's because nobody submitted.
Right.
Yeah.
So not for lack of trying.
Not for lack of trying. Yeah, absolutely
and
not.
Why did you have... This sounds like a stupid question, but I think you know why I'm asking it. Why did you feel it necessary to include male survivors?
I feel like the only person standing up for male survivors is men's rights activists, and they're bringing it up at the wrong time.
Okay.
And I feel like feminism has, let's see what we get for this, sometimes fails male survivors because they only come up at that time, and because then you have that instinct that it's a men's rights activist talking to you, but really it could just be a male survivor who needs help, and they need a voice. It's a unique experience. There is so much more stigma to coming out and talking about it, and male survivors need a voice too. It's happening to everybody. It absolutely is.
Well, my experience as a male survivor is that the only people I see publicly talking about sexual abuse really are female survivors or feminists, right? So then, when I was naive, when I was only on the internet for a couple days, I didn't understand how it worked totally. And I remember thinking, oh, look, they're talking about an experience I went through. Maybe I can join in on this experience. Boom, you're trying to derail this. Why are you bringing up men? It's so statistically infrequent. I don't even know why. And and also things like, well, you don't experience trauma the same way women do, so it probably wasn't as severe. I've even heard things like from feminists, it happened in prison. That's part of the culture of prison, so it's not the same as a woman being. And I'm like, so... As a male survivor, I kind of can feel like, well, where do I talk about it then? Right?
Absolutely. Yeah. Where the hell do you get to talk about it?
Yeah.
And I think a big thing, too, is that across the country, I really made sure to, when interviewers said, women going through this, and the women going through this, and the women going through this. And I just said, no, this happens to not only men, but also trans people. Let's not pretend that they don't exist like everybody else does forever and eternity. Like, this happens to
people.
Yeah. People of all ages and all genders. Yeah. And it's worth talking about it, and it's not worth silencing people. And whatever gets stirred up in you when you hear a male survivor talking, look into yourself. Whatever that is, don't drown that out with whatever good feels you have from whatever else you did that day. Look at what you're actually feeling and whether or not you're being fair, because chances are you're not.
Right. And I remember once we did this thing, you did it for the CBC, and I was interviewed while you were in Scotland. And I remember when I heard the finished product, you used a clip of mine, and it was kind of neat to hear. You said doing rape is real and everywhere even challenged some of your preconceived notions about
Oh, totally. Rape is Real and Everywhere broke my brain because I thought I knew what a survivor was, and that got challenged over and over again. And interacting with you and other male survivors totally changed my language, first of all, from only talking about female survivors. And I used to make prison rape jokes, and I used to...
Don't tell me you stopped. Please don't stop. Not on my account.
No. But you know what? I used to make dumb jokes, and I used to be... Really what it was is I used to be flippant about lives, you know? And you just think that you're not doing that, but you just have to keep on challenging yourself, because I really thought of you, you know, you were a kid. Mm-hmm. You weren't a thug. And even if you were, thugs don't deserve to get raped either. Nobody deserves to get raped. So... yeah, absolutely. You challenged my perception, and also, you know, who I was looking out for, because definitely for a long time I had my arm around women and everyone else could rot in hell.
And, you know, to be fair, I don't always necessarily think that when feminists say this, I'm paraphrasing a lot of stuff that I've heard. So
that's okay. I am a feminist. I guess I should mention this. Oh. I didn't off the start. Oh. I am a feminist. I'm just trying to be critical.
Okay, no, and that's fine. And that's cool.
And I'm not saying you can't. I mean, proceed to say whatever you want to say. Right. Just for anybody that's been listening this far and they're like, wow, they really both hate feminists. We don't, or I don't. Maybe you do. That'd be fair. Actually,
I wouldn't. I don't always have a high view of them.
I know.
But I've met lots of cool ones too, though. So
yeah. Okay. Proceed.
All I was gonna say was, when a feminist has said to me, and I'm paraphrasing, this is a female space and we don't need men speaking up, I don't think they're 100% wrong.
Yeah.
I just think they're okay, fair. But can I have is there a space I can go to?
Yes.
One of those men's rights act. Well, no, I don't necessarily want to go to that, but there isn't anything else now.
Yeah, absolutely. You need a space also. And it's really funny because I did get a lot of edgelords saying, like, what about male survivors on my show? And I'd be like, his name's Todd. You'll see him at 9 p.m., you know?
And that's just people causing trouble.
I know,
right?
I know.
There's the people who don't even leave their house to
I know.
Like, do you want to... I have a soda stream. Would you like some sparkling water?
Sure.
Okay, I'm going to ask you a question that you can answer while I go get you the sparkling water.
Okay, sounds good.
So, overall, what would you say the positive and or negative effects of doing the show were since? Because it's been a couple years now. Like, how did it change or impact your life? How did it... yeah, we're good. How did... Because I know afterwards, once the tour was done, you had a crash of sorts.
Yeah, that could be true. I didn't crash as bad as Emma crashed. Emma really crashed, and hopefully that's okay to say. She probably said it on your podcast. She really, really crashed. I was okay. I think when you do something that's capital S special and it twinkles and everybody loves it, when that thing ends, you just kind of wonder if you should still be alive, especially if you have mental health issues. So yeah, Rape is Real and Everywhere was amazing. We met so many survivors that we had booked and never ever met. And so we just met these people that were incredible and they were processing in different ways. And we met people across the country. And then we met people that talked to us after the show. And that was really, really incredible. And so that whole experience was just straight up amazing. I think it's funny. I did do a radio documentary for the CBC. That was so hard to do. I'm trained in journalism, and so doing a radio documentary about comedy is pretty much my MO. And listening back to people's sets and working in a vacuum and just kind of writing about my own assault for several months was brutal.
One of the things I found is, not that I dealt with as much as you did by any stretch, but it did come up a little bit as I kept on getting requests to do interviews about my rape and stuff like this, and as the male survivor, what do you have to say? And I got to a point where I said, yeah, I'm done talking about it. Like I'm tired of being like the token rape. survivor, and it's like, because it's to a certain degree, I'm not ashamed of anything that's ever happened to me, and I'll talk about it when I want to talk about it.
Exactly.
Then when I don't want to talk about it anymore, can we talk about ferrets or PEI or anything but rape? Because I don't want to be identified.
Same.
Like the only thing you are is that woman who was raped, who did the rape show.
That happens. Yeah. That happens sometimes. People are like, it's 2 p.m. and you are in a coffee shop. And if they're a survivor and they want to talk about it, then I'll actually probably be fine. But if they're just a person that's like, hey, so you were raped, huh? And you're like, I just want to eat my savory scone. So I do understand that. And also, I really apologize. One of the things that happened, even though we were in a professional CBC effing studio, is that Mark detailed what happened to him, and then my producer said, "Can you say that again?" And I was like, what?
What was the problem? It just wasn't recording well?
It just wasn't recording well. I don't know what was going on with CBC those few months, but there was recording issues, and like every studio, there was like one hiccup. And I was like, guys, you had one job. You're CBC Radio. Just record the interview. So I am super sorry about that.
Oh, I didn't care. And I actually made a judgment call in that moment where she's like, can you say it all again? And I'm just thinking, yeah, no. Like, part of me, I was tempted to, because I thought it might be good for the project you were working on. But then there was this, I don't know, some other voice inside me went, Mark, you don't need to, like, for your own, like, dignity. You said it once. That's their fucking problem if they didn't get it. You know what I mean?
And if you said it twice, there's a chance she might get you to say it a third time, because that's radio. I had to record myself detailing my own assault. Like, I'm going to say 50 times, and it is not easy to do. And the first time, just putting it out there, it sounded so good. I cried, genuinely, and then halfway through, I sounded like a lizard person because I just didn't care anymore. And then by the end of it, I just sounded like a normal person on the radio. What a journey. Fucking ridiculous.
I wonder how many times we've said rape so far in this. I've had a few interviews with guests who the overarching subject is sexual abuse, sexual violence, and stuff like that. And some of my listeners can't have messaged me, said great episode, but I couldn't listen to the whole thing. Right? And
that's okay.
No, it's fair. It's a touchy subject. Zing, heyo.
Oh yeah. You're fired.
I know. I'm my boss.
I know.
I sexually harass myself too.
Oh my god.
I always welch on the promotion though. So what was I thinking? Okay. So. Yeah. Let's get into the other part, shall we?
Yeah.
There's been a development.
I know.
In the last.
For everyone.
Well, I guess it's not just in the last couple months. It's a bit longer than that, but
it's all kinds of timelines.
Okay.
For everybody who's found me palatable so far, buckle up, because it's gonna suck. So one of the things that I detailed when I did Rape is Real and Everywhere is a time in my life where I was a real terrible person. And one of the problems is that at that time I thought I was a good person who did bad things, and that was kind of what I was running with. But I had been contacted by my rapist, and I didn't quite realize yet that I had been raped, so I just kind of started unraveling, and then I got dumped, lol, and then I just started drinking a lot, and I got really, really mean. And this was the summer of 2015. And I just burned every bridge I could. And then in September, I called the suicide hotline because I decided to be sober. And oh boy, was that not great. And I called the suicide hotline, and that's kind of when everything changed. And that story I've told a lot of times, and it's in my jokes, and it's in the radio documentary. And one of the people that I hurt most at that time, everybody forgave me for that time. You know, when I stopped drinking so much, and I stopped pretending that I was a good person who did bad things, and realized I was just actually a bad person. I reached out and apologized to a lot of people, and one person never forgave me. And after doing our show, I started to worry about why that was. Because I was sleeping with a guy who I made really, really sure he knew he meant nothing to me. And that sucks on its own. So I'd been dumped, and there was another guy I liked, but I wasn't supposed to like him, so I wasn't seeing him either. And then there was this guy who was just my friend. And so he and I started sleeping together. And I've slept with people who I, don't want to marry, and there's always been a reason to do it, whether or not it's funny or, we're just having a good time or whatever. And this was none of those things. I was super alone and I hated myself, and he was there, and he was a friend to me, and I did not treat him that way whatsoever. I made sure to talk about who I actually liked and who I was actually in love with, and I slapped cigarettes out of his hands, like I don't know what. And there was one night in particular that I was blackout, and I can count on one hand how many times I've been blackout. And I woke up the next morning, and I think what really sucks is that this used to be in my jokes too, because I didn't realize how bad it was. I woke up the next morning and I said, "Hey, how was I?" And he said, "Terrible." And I said, "Like in bed?" And he said, "No, just like as a person." And at the time we laughed about it, and we stepped outside because the other people that lived there were a couple who we were friends with as well. And we talked about how shitty I was because A, I had given him a hand job while talking about my ex-boyfriend, and then B, I told him to come on my stomach or whatever. And then I don't know what else, but those were the two details that I got to have about that night. And then we laughed it off. But I knew the guy that I was sleeping with was actually really hurt. And so things between me and him kind of dissolved after that. And I apologized, but it wasn't a real apology. It was a good person who does bad things apology. And so it was kind of like, oh, I'm so fucked up, lol, more than it was a real apology. And the worst part is that, it's not the worst part. It's going to get so much worse. I was going home to Prince Edward Island, and he had some gym clothes of mine, and he didn't know what to do with them, and we had pretty much stopped talking. And I told him to bring them to my house, but I was still drinking a lot those days. And so I drank so much I fell asleep with all my lights on, and I woke up to several missed calls and the gym clothes on my porch step. And that's when I knew like my friendship was dead, and that's when I knew I was a bad person. Like that was the signifier that I had totally changed over from a quirky girl who did bad things and then felt kind of bad about it and was like, I ruined a relationship with a person who was only good to me, and I just lashed out until he hated me. And that was bad on its own. And then I felt worried about that night because I didn't remember the rest of that night, and because as much as we joked, I knew he was upset. And he was also younger than me. I won't say how old he was because I don't want people to know who he is. But he was younger than me, and I was higher up in the scene than he was. And I just thought about the power dynamic and the age dynamic and the fact that I was drinking so much. And I started to worry that maybe something happened. I think the first time I voiced that I was worried something happened was with Emma in Montreal halfway through our tour. Because I had a breakdown about everything. I did 4 interviews that morning, and I just cried, and I felt like a fraud. And I basically detailed every shitty thing I'd ever done to a survivor. Like, I was like, one time when I was in grade school, somebody was accused of assault, and then they just said that the girl made it up to be interesting, and I believed the dude. And then another time I laughed at a book that had been written by a guy whose sister was raped, and that's why he made a book about consent, and I had been joking about it, and it still almost makes me cry every time I talk about that fucking book, because he just did something so genuine, and I tried to make fun of it, and I was like 20, and I just like will always regret that. And then I said I was worried that I did something to my friend. And Emma, I don't remember what Emma said. I don't remember what she said to comfort me. I don't think she said, like, oh, of course you didn't. I think she just said, well, I guess we'll find out when we find out, you know? Or you know, I guess that's a conversation you can have with that person. And then I just tucked that back down because I had another half of a tour to do. And then I went, in last year, I went to Scotland to do my master's, and I kind of, I accidentally wrote all of my scripts. It was a master in screenwriting. All of my scripts were about forgiveness, like on both sides, about like a person fucking up and whether or not you decide to forgive them. Because I had been through my own shit, where there was a lot of people I wasn't ready to forgive and all this stuff. And I started thinking about that guy again, and I talked to my therapist, and I said, look, I don't know what I did. I don't know if I did anything bad. And she said, well, you probably didn't, you know, whatever. You're a survivor. You wouldn't do that. But I decided to send him a message. And I said, you know, you've never said anything happened that night, but I just want to know that nothing happened that night because it haunts me. And I know I was a bad person, but I just want to know that I wasn't a bad person and a rapist. And he never responded to that. That was last June, I think.
To 2017.
2017, yeah. And then this winter, I moved back here to Vancouver. And first of all, I got hit by a car, which just happened and was a very unique experience. So like physically, I got hit by a car. And then I was still trying to do stand-up. And one night I went up and I did a lotto spot at Yuck Yucks, and it was great and it was fun. And I got off stage and I got a message that I had been unbooked from a show because I was pointed to for sexual assault. And my whole world just unspooled. And I don't remember how I got home, but I know that Emma came over and talked to me all night, and basically we were just both trying to make sure I didn't kill myself. And she even slept over, which is like, God bless her. And we talked about, okay, then it did happen. So what do we do now? Oh, man.
Can you say it again? I didn't record it.
I hope you know, as a person who makes radio, I already was thinking like, oh, this would be great if this didn't record.
Yeah, it just fucking glitched
so
up.
Super, yeah.
Yeah, no, we got it. I was watching. So,
oh, fuck.
Now, one thing I know about it, though, from previous discussions is that when you did get accused, the person, the for lack of a better term, victim,
Yeah, right.
Has never actually said anything to you. So when you found out you were accused, it was actually like a third party.
It was third party. Right? It was a person booking me from their show.
Can you talk about the details surrounding that?
Totally.
Okay.
So it's very strange. Emma and I were talking that night about what I would do. But the thing is like, he didn't talk to me. It was third person. And then the people, a large chunk, a handful of people that were definitely my closest friends in the comedy community were the people that found out first, and then they just cut all communication off with me. So despite having the feeling that I did something that night, I still don't know what I did.
Right.
I don't know how bad it was. Whatever that guy says, I believe him, and I want to be really clear about that. So whatever he told people, whatever he says happened that night, I believe him. He just has not communicated that to me yet.
Right.
Nor has he appointed anybody to communicate that to me, so I still don't know.
And what's interesting about that is I remember when you and I were talking about this, for our listeners, we tried to have this we tried to record this episode a couple weeks ago, and
I did.
Let's just say I didn't have any Valium around the house, we weren't really, but
I successfully did not barf in Mark's house, and that I think we can all call a miracle.
Yeah. But one thing that you said to me was, it bothers you that you can't remember because that's what your abuser said to you.
I know. Yeah. So when I was raped, fun story, I was raped by a guy on his birthday. And he was blackout drunk. And I actually didn't want to go home with him because I didn't want to rape him. But he begged and begged and begged for me to come home with him. So I did. And then he was sexually violent. And I left his house bleeding the next morning, like very confused. And it took me a really long time to talk to him about it because it took him saying, "Hey, want to hang out? I haven't seen you in years." And being like, no, I don't think so. And not quite knowing why that was, and then realizing that I had left his house bleeding and coming to terms with that, and just straight up telling him that, just saying like, I actually left your house bleeding the last time we hung out, and I don't think it's a good idea to hang out again. And I even pressed charges, or tried to press charges against him, and he literally just told the police officer, I don't think he said she's a liar, I don't think he said anything, I just think he said, I don't remember anything. And to be honest, I think that's true.
I think often in these cases, and that this doesn't, even if it, and I'm to include you in what I'm about to say, is I don't think it exonerates anyone.
No, absolutely not. But yeah, let's be clear about that.
I think most of these situations, so, okay, when people think about rape, most people think it's the guy in the ski mask with the windowless van and a knife and rope and stuff like that, which are actually the smallest. If you took 100 rapes, there's probably less than 10 of those. Yeah. Like 10, if you took 10 rapes in a given period of time, probably less than 5 would be that type of the classic stereotypical example. Those are actually quite rare.
Yep.
The people who do them, it's a very pathological problem that's wrong with those people. They're usually psychopaths, or there's something mental illness. Mm-hmm. And almost always they do get prosecuted, and almost always they do go to jail for a very long time.
Yeah.
The problem with rapes in our society, and the reason that feminists have a problem, and there's been like John Gomeshi and all these things, it's when the rapist knows the victim.
Yep.
And they maybe even had a previous consensual sexual relationship, or
absolutely,
they maybe didn't have a previous one, but it was a date of some kind, and there was there's an implication or assumption that it could possibly be going towards sex and all that kind of stuff.
Yes.
And personally, I think most of those situations, not all, and I'm not even going to say, I'll say a lot of them rather than most, a lot of them aren't perpetrated by people who go, I can't wait to get this bitch back to my house so I can rape her.
Yeah.
It's more of a...
It's a societal issue where people don't understand what they have a right to.
Right.
You and I had an interesting conversation about people who do things that are consensually blurry. I slept with somebody recently who just kept on slipping it in without a condom on, even though we had negotiated not doing that.
Right.
And I wasn't traumatized by it. I'm traumatized by other things.
Right.
But I just was like, dude, you can't. Your need to feel that feeling does not trump my body being my body.
Right.
That belongs to me, and we negotiated that is not the kind of sex that was going to happen. So I think people think they deserve a lot more of people than they actually do.
Right.
And I think especially when you negotiate it out loud, not that if you don't negotiate it out loud. Anyway, so many asterisks.
It's nuanced and levels and shades and
but you don't have the right to another person's body.
No.
That's it. You just don't.
No.
And a lot of people aren't super aware of that.
Right.
And that's a societal thing that we have to
then there's the level, which, and I think this is a very common thing, and I think most people are guilty of these things, is similar to what you were saying. Let's say you and I are hooking up.
Yeah.
And especially if we didn't necessarily clearly communicate what exactly we want to do with each other, which is still super common even in this day and age with consent being talked about.
For sure.
So you might want me to just go down on you with no vaginal penetration.
Yeah.
And I might want to do the whole enchilada.
Yeah.
But we didn't talk about it precisely.
Yeah.
So I go for the vaginal penetration.
Yeah.
And you may not have wanted to do that, and maybe you don't exactly tell me you didn't want me to, but you... your nonverbal cues are saying you didn't, and I didn't, and I'm like, oh, I can't totally tell if she wants to, but she's not saying no, so now is that a rape? I don't think so.
I think the thing that we need to start working with is enthusiastic consent.
That's right.
Absolutely. That's the next step, is enthusiastic consent, because we just have to stop guessing that when someone's not fully grimacing that they're into it.
Right.
I think that's the next step. I think that's what we're working towards. And everybody listening, if you could please just have enthusiastic consent with everybody forever, that would make my heart glow and be very warm. I know the thing that I need to do in my current relationship is to just fess up to when I'm too full to have sex. I have so much sex where I'm super full.
And you don't feel like doing it.
No.
Yeah.
Nope.
But that's another thing. I think anyone who's over 21 who's had more than 2 sexual partners, consensual sexual partners, has had sex with someone or at a time with someone when they didn't really want to, but they just were like, okay, this will get them off my back.
Yeah.
And again, that's not a rape, but it's not exactly like having had sex when I didn't really want to.
Yeah.
I'm pretty sure the other person probably wouldn't have been stoked to know that I was just at that moment going along to get along.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
And I'm not even going to say I totally regret that, because at the time I didn't feel like getting in an argument.
Yeah, same. I've done it.
And I don't hold that against them for even arguing or anything like that, but I just thought, okay, I'll act a bit more enthusiastic than I really am. She'll feel a bit better. Then that's the end of it. And so
everybody comes, we all go home.
But I don't think that's necessarily the best way to do things either, right?
No, it's not, and it's not. Yeah,
No.
it's really, really not. That's an ugly place we get to, that we also need to stop getting to.
But to clarify again, I don't think that's rape. If I did that, let's say you and I were dating, and one day I'm too full.
Yeah.
And you're like, Mark, I'm going to jump your bones right now. And I didn't feel like it. But I went, oh, fuck. She's going to fucking ream me out if I don't do it. And we'll do it. I don't think it's fair for me to 6 months later say I didn't really want to do it, and I think that was sexual assault.
Yeah, I think I want to clarify the difference between that and the freeze response.
Yeah.
Like fight, flight, or freeze.
Yeah.
I think if you did listen to my doc, so you heard Adora talking about freezing, and that's a real response. You will fight until you can't fight anymore, and then you'll freeze, or maybe you'll just freeze. But freezing is a real response that survivors have. I froze. I was getting, like I was getting violently sexually assaulted and I didn't leave his house. I don't know if he would not have I don't know. I don't know if I could have left that house successfully, but I know that I was in Burnaby and it was 3:00 in the morning and I didn't want to go outside just to get raped by somebody else. So I just stayed and continued to get raped by the person inside
two rapes
the house.
Don't make a right.
Oh my God.
I'm going to keep on doing it.
No, I mean, I do, I do want you to keep doing it.
Yeah.
Consent. Do you want to get to the response to more of how it went?
Oh, yeah, right. So back to when you raped that person.
Yeah, I know. God.
So you monster.
I know.
Okay.
I was in the story as far as Emma and I talking about what to do next.
Right. So, yeah, and this is all fairly recent. Like, this is all just in the last couple months.
This
right?
is January.
Right. So we're not that far away from it.
Nope, we sure aren't.
And the person in question, the victim, as it were, and you still have not actually had a conversation about it. And you're saying he doesn't have to if he doesn't want to, and all that kind of stuff. Yeah.
The only communication I have gotten from him, but I sent him one more message, but I'm kind of jumping the gun here, so I'll go back in time. Yeah. So there was a few things I tried to do. I tried to talk to other people and get what happened out of them because I didn't want to re-traumatize him. Mm-hmm. I also spoke to, because this happened right around me too. I reached out to a newly formed group of people taking comedy sexual assault stories. And they were taking stories and they weren't sure what they were going to do with it, but they just wanted to hear people out and try to make a process. And Emma was part of that group. And so I wrote to them and I said, listen, here's the message I sent in June. Here's the message I got yesterday. I am committed to process. I believe survivors. What do I do next? And they genuinely said, yeah, it's usually not the rapist that emails us, so we have no idea what to do. And I was like, okay, that's fair. And they said, we can't really do anything if the guy doesn't want to do anything yet, which he didn't, he wasn't talking to me, so he did not want to talk to me. And what's crazy is that the next shows I had booked were actually with all the women who ran that forum. And we talked about it, and I said, do you guys want to book me even though you know this about me? And they said, if you're committed to process, and if you're not going to do this again, then yeah, I think so. And so I did their shows. And so I was trying to figure out the right thing to do with being shut out by everybody. So I also called the Sexual Assault Center. And I said, listen, I'm a survivor, but I also am apparently a rapist. So what do I do to make his life easier? What do I do to be capital F fair? Because that's what I really want, is to be fair moving forward. And also just like, what do I deserve? Because no one is telling me. I really feel like it's so interesting being on this side, because being a rapist is like being a male chick. You're just not supposed to exist anymore. And so because I haven't been grinded into a pulp, I'm just still here and I don't quite know what to do. So I talked to the Sexual Assault Center and I told them what I had been up to, and they pretty much told me I was doing everything right. They just said, like, you reached out to the person, you apologized, you're trying to make things better. Good luck out there, champ.
Because really, there's nothing else you can do, especially if they're not wanting to proceed with anything.
That's exactly it. Like, I can't pester them.
Yeah, and you can't go to the police and throw yourself and say, arrest me, please.
Especially since I don't remember anything. Yeah. And boy, do I hate that I am saying that out loud, because it sounds like a cop-out, and it's not. And even if I wanted to go to police, if I say I don't remember anything, that's enough that my rapist didn't get charged. So I already know that wouldn't proceed, because I've been on the exact other side of this. So The only way I got anything was I went to a Safe Night event, which made me feel like the snakiest snake of all snake time. But I felt like I was trying to, do my due process. And so I went. And I actually went as a predator person in recovery, not as my usual survivor cap. And the only saving grace I had about being so weird is that I genuinely had been just hit by a car. So when people asked me how I was, I would just say I was hit by a car, because that also happened. So that night, I saw my the guy who has accused me, and I believe him. I saw his roommate, and I asked him if I could talk to him. And God bless him, because he said yes. And he and I bawled our fucking eyes out in the corner of that room. And I just said, look, I've sent a message to him. I don't know what I did, and I would like to know. I believe him no matter what. But I don't know what I did, and I don't know how to move forward. And he said, I don't think it's my right to tell you. I think only he can tell you, so maybe you should send him one more message. And then when I had the blessing to send one more message to my friend, that guy, then I decided to message him again. So I sent him a message and just said, like, first of all, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. Second of all, I'm sorry that the last message I sent to you, where I asked you, am I a rapist, was basically the directive to say, do not tell me I am a rapist. I am very traumatized, which is not the way to do it. And I asked him if I could apologize publicly, to which he never responded. And that's basically it. I have been going to therapy. I go to therapy a lot. I don't know if you've heard that in this interview. I go to a lot of therapy.
In Kitsilano, by the way.
In Kitsilano. But it's cheap. I told Mark it's cheap therapy. So basically, I have not heard from that guy until I talked to Mark, and
me, Mark, you mean? Yeah.
You, Mark.
Yeah.
And I told him that I was accused, because I told a lot of people. I didn't tell people who it was, obviously, on the other side, but I just told people that I felt deserved to know before proceeding professionally with me, basically. So Mark asked me if I wanted to be on the podcast, and I said I can, but I have been accused. And then we met up in person, and he said, yeah, I already knew that. And that's why I almost barfed in his house. And that changed the dynamic, because before I didn't feel like I could talk about this publicly, because I didn't have that guy's permission to do that. And that felt like, especially since I used to be a reporter, so I definitely have a lizard brain that is always operating for like the best story. And so I have to fight that lizard brain a lot. And so if I had have come out of this and immediately like cashed out and been like, I've been on both sides of me too, give me $1 million, then that doesn't mean I'm adhering to due process at all. Plus, from the sounds of it, the guy who accused me didn't actually want people to know. It sounds like he told 2 people. It sounds like those people then told a lot of people, and that really sucks. If a survivor tells you something, it's their right to report. It's their right to let people know. It's theirs, and I'm judging on the side of the rapist. So whatever that's worth, asterisks again. But it sounded like he didn't want people to know. And so that was one of the big reasons I didn't come forward, is because it's all about what's best for him, really. But then Mark told me that he knew and that a lot of people knew. So I sent him one last message, and I said...
For real? This is for real, the last message?
This is the real last message,
right.
yeah. This is the real last message I sent.
Yeah.
It was like 2 days ago, and I said, hey... It sounds like enough people know I'm going to respond. I'm going to keep you anonymous. I'm going to do Mark's podcast. And he said, okay, exclamation mark. And that is the first I have heard from him in a year?
Pulling the trigger, rape survivor approved podcast.
Yeah. So he was.
We can get people talking when no one else. Anyway, go on.
Oh God. Yeah. So he has given me the blessing to do this podcast, and this is it.
And here we are.
Yeah.
Well, like I said, like we had talked about, like you alluded to, and thank you for telling us this side of the story. I appreciate it. It must be very difficult. And,
yeah.
I bet. I had heard the story.
Yeah.
I had heard the story from someone who was accused of sexual assault themselves, actually, before they were accused of sexual assault. And I had heard the details. I'm not going to repeat the details here because I don't like that broken telephone thing.
Yeah. Yeah, for the record, Mark told me what he heard third hand, but I mean, that's also third hand. And so I don't feel, and that's
one of the reasons I don't, like, I was always like, because people would whisper it and I'd be like, yeah, okay, maybe it happened, but I'm hearing it like from fourth hand information now, and apparently, and he's not, so, but then one thing I did hear, and again, dear listener, take this however you want, because I heard it from a guy who heard it from a guy kind of thing, but I think there was a valuable lesson in this. When Me Too stuff was going on, especially in comedy, especially in Vancouver comedy, I guess some people had asked him, why doesn't he want to come forward with his story?
Oh, yeah.
And there's two, like, what I heard was there's two reasons he didn't want to. One, he just wanted to put it all behind him. Mm-hmm. Two, he was afraid that feminists would go after him and say he was making trouble.
Yeah. And
if that is true, that's pretty fucking sad.
It is.
And I don't think, if it is true, I don't think it's an unfounded fear either.
It's not. This is what's really surprising about me telling people that I had been accused of sexual assault. Okay, so when I was explaining this to people, I really wanted to be clear that I believed him, whatever he came forward with. And still, people would say, he is vengeful. He is trying to get back at you. This never happened. He was a kid. He just misremembers.
As a female who's been involved in rape type stuff, you ever heard that stuff before? Ever?
Well,
it's usually a different voice and tenor in the voice that's saying that kind of thing.
I know. It was people who I trusted. It was people who are feminists and who are
really well versed on all this stuff.
On this stuff. And the second, it was A, a woman, B, they knew this stuff paraded out of their mouth. And I had to just say, like, okay, pretend you don't know me. Pretend I'm a man. And say everything you just said out loud to me again. And then they would kind of go, oh, like, yeah, like, I believe this guy. I don't remember what happened. Again, so shitty, trademark. But I believe him whenever he wants to tell me. If he wants to nominate somebody else to tell me, that would be super helpful. I believe him. And that was a struggle for a lot of people. And a lot of people that should be looking out for survivors. That sucks.
And what I can say is, without turning it around onto me, welcome to my world. And I don't mean me just as in Mark as an individual, but me as in a lot of men I know.
Yeah.
I've been sexually assaulted by women. Okay, now to be clear, to clarify, was I traumatized by it in a way that I was traumatized like in the way when I was sexually assaulted by men? No. Mm-hmm. Does it keep it? Do I feel? Am I really messed up because of it? No. But if we were to look at the legal definition of sexually assault, I was sexually assaulted.
Yeah,
and I remember that one happened last year. And long story short, brought a girl back home. She was too drunk. I was like, no, this. And everything seemed okay. Then all of a sudden, I think she she had one too many, and it was the one that tipped her over. And I went, no, we're not doing this, because she seemed to be into it, then she wouldn't be into it. She seemed, and I said, okay, we're not doing this because you're going to regret this tomorrow. She fucking flipped out and wouldn't take no for an answer. I told her no explicitly, verbally, 3 different times, and she put my cock in her mouth. Yeah. And I was like, okay, stop, right?
Yeah.
I told you this when we were the other day when we attempted to do this interview. I said, the thing that I was most afraid about was 2 things. There were 2 things I was most afraid about. If a man had been doing that to me, I would have punched his fucking head down and but I don't know what to do when a woman does it, right? Yep. 2, she wouldn't leave my house, and she started crying. And what's wrong with me? What's wrong with me? Why won't you have sex with me? Mom, geez, what's wrong with me? And I got thinking, like, I didn't care. I wasn't feeling bad for her, but I'm thinking, I don't even think I can get this woman out of my house right now. And I've just been, legally speaking, sexually assaulted. And if I call the police, I might end up in cuffs. Yeah. And then when I would tell people about it, I told a guy friend the next day, and he said, that sounds like a good problem to have. Yeah. And I told women about it, and they said, well, Mark, you have to understand that rejection means a lot to women because they've been socialized to believe that their sex appeal is all that's there. And I'm thinking, wow, what an interesting response on both ends. I know. The guy one wasn't that surprising. Yeah. The woman one was, though. That's like it. Right away, it's the explanation as to, right? Because can you imagine your friend comes to you and says, Jeff sexually assaulted me the other day. He said, Susie, you have to understand that men are conditioned to, like, you just wouldn't do that, right? But totally. And just to clarify something, I'm kind of a very pragmatic. I just realize that life fucking is shitty in certain ways sometimes. And I don't really even, as much as it can suck to go through some of this stuff, I realize that being a male and being sexually assaulted by a female is different and shatters any images that people have of anything on. So men think people don't even think it's possible because a man can fight back, and we're horny bastards and pigs, so why wouldn't we want it? Women think, well, it's rape is something that only happens to women and men and da-da-da-da-da. And I know these are realities we're dealing with, and I'm not even one who's going to be like, well, it should be different, because yes, it should be, but that's the reality we're dealing with. So I sometimes realize, okay, to go back to the example I used. Yeah. Okay, that's what people think. So, okay, sometimes you're going to be on your own with some of this shit.
I think if what's important to remember is that you just don't have the right to another person's body. Right. And if you're a woman and they're a man, you still don't have the right to somebody else's body. That's it. I think people are totally, yes, women can assault men. You can still have a power dynamic there. You can still be forceful. Take care of people. Be in tune with people. And if you're not sure if you're in tune with somebody, then ask questions. Is your mouth broken? No? Then ask questions. And if it turns somebody off to ask questions, then don't have sex with that person. That's it. I know this is coming from me, the snake, but I'm a snake in recovery, and it's just so important to communicate with people, because otherwise you don't know what you're inflicting on somebody. And that is going to haunt them and you for the rest of your life.
What do you think? Okay, so here we are. Boom. It's out now. This episode will be probably released fairly shortly. Okay. What do you think should be done now?
It's interesting. Yeah. I don't know what I deserve. I have... Starting with booking shows in the Maritimes, I've let people know that I've been accused. One person, both people that I booked with were survivors that were on my show. So it's quite funny because the girl I booked with, I said, listen, I've been accused. These are the steps I've taken. Book me if you wish. She took a day. She talked to her co-producer and she said, okay. I hadn't really thought about my guy friend that I was just going to book with whatever, and I had completely forgotten to tell him, and then I was like, oh, I have to tell you something terrible, and I told him, and he took a week, and he was really troubled by it, and we basically had a long phone call, and he asked me a lot of questions, and just I think he wanted to make sure that I wasn't just smooth talking, you know? And so eventually he decided that I can also be on his show, but it wasn't without a good week's worth of chat leading up to that. I think one of the most interesting things that we talked about last week, and I said one of the greatest shames of this for me is that I wanted to be a champion for male survivors, and doing this is the opposite of being a champion for male survivors. And you asked me, am I going to do it again? And I said, no, obviously not. And am I sorry? To which, yes, I am so, so sorry. And then you said, okay, then you can still be a champion for survivors. And that meant a lot to me, especially from you, because I feel like you are very direct. There's a lot of people in comedy who, for a lot of reasons, are super indirect, and you have to get through so many layers to find out how they're feeling, and that's not you. And so I really appreciated that. And so I don't know what the exact steps are next, but I just, if you want to interact with me, you can, and if you don't, I also respect that. I did something terrible. I don't know exactly what it is, but I know what it feels like on the other side. And so I don't hold any judgment for anybody that doesn't want to communicate with me or doesn't want to work with me. That's okay too. But I think talking about what you can do next as a person who's committed this crime, it is a crime, and is genuinely sorry, I think that's something we have to start doing.
Well, and that's one of the problems with this whole Me Too thing, is that, okay, on the one hand, it gave people a voice. It gave victims a microphone, as it were, which is good. But then what?
Yeah.
And now we're talking to someone who's been on both sides now.
Yeah.
And okay, for sexual violence in our culture and our society, there should be consequences for it.
Yes.
Here's the one tricky part in your particular case, though.
Yeah.
The victim still hasn't officially said anything.
That's
so
it, yeah.
He's not calling for any kind of... He hasn't even actually acknowledged technically, publicly, that he's a victim.
Yes.
Right?
Yep.
So, in your particular case, there's not much... I can't demand social consequences from you yet, because no one's actually... You could be fucking lying right now. For all seriously, right? You could be one of those bitches just looking for attention. I see how you guys... No, but you know what I mean?
Every woman saying she's raped someone for attention.
Yeah, being a rape victim doesn't get you enough attention. Now you got to say you are a rapist. But in your particular... Like, it is a tricky one in that regard. But let's just assume everything's legit. There is a victim. There is a victimizer. There should be some kind of consequence or repercussion for it, right? Yeah. Now, my only question is, and this applies to what, regardless of the gender of the victim or the offender, but mainly more pointed towards male offenders, is, do we completely just cast them out of society? And well, you can't. So, do we just let them go from town to town without any attempt at rehabilitation? Or anything like that? Like, because theoretically, you could have just shut the fuck up about this, gone to PEI, and no one would have ever even known. And yes, you're contrite, and yes, you want to change your behavior, but it's just as easy that maybe you would have been, I was drunk, I don't remember it, and you could do something like that again.
That's it. I think what's important to look for is genuine remorse, because a lot of the people revealed in Me Too were people that did this from place to place, and everyone protected them and no one protected survivors. Right. I think...
And a lot of them, like you said, people knew they were doing it and stuff like that.
Yes, and didn't stop that.
And it wasn't necessarily protection where it's like I'm getting in front of them and saying, fuck off. It's more like the protection from silence or being like, oh, just don't bring it up.
Yeah, the reason I reported my assault is because the more I talked to people, the more I realized people kind of were serial predators, and I was worried that maybe my rapist was one of those people because he was violent with me, and I don't know if that came out of nowhere. But I left his house bleeding from a few places, and I was like, maybe that is not the first time he's done that. And that's the only reason I reported, is because I just thought, I don't want that to happen to somebody else. And so I think there's two really interesting things, if people want to listen to interesting things on forgiveness and how to do things right. Dan Harmon apologized for the way he treated a staff member, and he was so genuine, and he only blamed himself, and that's so important. He owned up to it. He made sure he was the only person to blame. He made sure that people didn't lash out at her. And he apologized. And that has pretty much gone unseen. I think there's a question of what happens next, but first of all, rapists should start being sorry. That hasn't happened a ton. You get a lot of people saying, why is this bitch or a bastard trying to ruin my life? Or, oh, lol, guess I'm gay. No, apologize. And don't apologize only because enough people have accused you and there's photo evidence and all that. Apologize because you are sorry. And feel sorry that this has happened and that you have inflicted this on somebody. I have to say, this broke my brain being on the other side of this. And for every person that has decided to keep loving me and to keep interacting with me, I am super, super grateful, because I don't know what they owe me. And I don't know what anybody owes me. But I am super grateful to those people who say, okay, I love you. You are working on this as hard as you can, and that's what matters. The other thing, which is an interview I recommended to you, and I can't remember if you actually listened to it, but maybe we can link it underneath. It's Catherine Hoke on the Tim Ferriss podcast, and she works with people who have come out of prison, and she also fucked up. And she talks about all those things, and she talks about how to move forward when you've done the absolute worst things you can do. So I think the next phase is about, deciding that you're actually sorry and wanting to make things right for the most people possible, and not just for yourself. Despite the fact that I told you before this interview that I have a list of places I'm going to go into hiding. If rural Prince Edward Island is not enough, I'm not really going into hiding. I'm still going to keep on being a stand-up comedian. I just happen to be from there. But just be open to process. Be sorry. And if you're interacting with these people, it's really hard to believe people. It's so hard to believe people who have committed crimes against you if they say they're sorry. I think the reason that the guy I assaulted doesn't think I'm sorry is because I spent a long time apologizing and not meaning it. And that's before I knew I did anything that's bad. But I gave him a lot of shitty apologies. So when I finally apologized from my heart, I don't know why he would see any difference. I knew I had changed. But he doesn't know that, because he's closed himself off to me because that was the healthiest thing for him.
There's also, I'm taking a guess at this, so this could not be true at all, but there's something I can say about when a woman's done something that is abusive or assaulted you.
Yeah.
There's shame that goes along with it as a man, because we think we were weak. And we also think like it wasn't really, I feel like I was assaulted, but I don't think I'm allowed to feel like I was assaulted because I'm a man and I should be down to fuck at all times.
Yeah.
And there's no, and if an attractive woman wanted to have sex and I didn't want to have sex, what does that say about me?
There's
right?
a ton of stigma there.
Yeah, sometimes we just want to be like, I don't want to talk about it anymore because nothing happened.
Yeah, because nothing happened. Ha
Right.
ha ha. I'm going to pause you for 1 second.
Yeah, sure. Yeah. Yeah. Blow away.
Okay.
So I can say that could be a potential layer to it. It's hard for men to admit when a woman has done something that it would constitute an assault.
Yeah.
For a variety of reasons.
Yeah.
Often, speaking from having had it happen to me a couple times, I don't know what it's like to be a female victim, but sometimes when you're a male victim and it's a female offender, it wasn't 100% unwanted. I might have wanted to fuck you, but then I don't know. Then and it might be hard for you to understand because men generally, especially if you had a previous sexual relationship, it doesn't mean that it's so it's confusing that way too. We also get aroused.
Yeah.
We're also scared of hurting your feelings. We're also, again, then there's this sort of feminist narrative that's like, oh, fuck, am I going to, especially if it's a more woke guy, for lack of a better term, where they're going to be like, oh, do I even have a right to say anything about this, right? So it's a unique little cookie.
It is. And I'll tell you one experience that is the closest I can relate to your side, which is I also have dated and seen women, and I have an ongoing thing about loving French women.
Yeah.
And I went to Vietnam. That's where my dad lives. And there was this beautiful young French woman who just arrived, and she was like amazing, and she was bisexual, and we found that out the first night. And we were hanging out together, and she was really sexually aggressive, and I was attracted to her, but she was so sexually aggressive, and I was so fresh off of coming to terms with my sexual assault. I just had to get away from her. And she came into my tent and was following me everywhere. And I couldn't spend any time with her. I literally just had to say, look, you have to get away from me. We never kissed. We never did anything. But she just was on my body. And she put me through an absolute panic because she just didn't have any boundaries. And I think as a adorable little queer French woman, she didn't ever have to know what boundaries were before. And listen up, ladies, we all have to take care with people.
Heather, you have to understand that women take rejection really poorly.
God.
Because they've been socialized in the patriarchy.
Jesus. It was crazy. I just had this beautiful French woman being like, please, can we hook up? I mean, being like, no, you are freaking me out.
And that's the thing, and I say it much more crudely when I'm sort of just talking, is like, my experience has been when women are down to fuck and you reject them, they do not take rejection very well. Like, I've had women, like the last time I was seriously called a faggot, like not someone just one of my buddies joking around with me, seriously called a faggot was a woman I turned down for sex. What are you, a faggot?
Yeah.
And it's like, whoa, like I thought, like after all these decades of all this shit, like and like you're not even that attractive anyway. Fucking, I've had men try and pay me for this puss. Like I've heard all kinds of stuff, and I'm grabby and like and it's like, I guess if I had to say anything, I had to sum up the thought I just had is, entitlement is unisex.
Entitlement to another person's body is not okay, no matter what gender you are.
And it's not just woman, men who think they
whole deal.
Yeah, and I think a lot of times, and to use the social socialization just to examine it for a second, what I've been told by people is that because women aren't actually used to being turned down, especially by men, that when it does happen, it causes a glitch in the matrix.
Yeah.
And they don't know how to respond. And because of these self-esteem issues that are, women are conditioned to believe that their worth relies totally in their pussy. I get it. But it doesn't come up, I think in a lot of women's case, it's not challenged very often. Yeah. And then when it is challenged, it's, well, hey man, I don't like being turned down for sex either. Just as a male in our society, as someone who's trying to be ethical and not hurt people, I've had to learn how to deal with that rejection.
Totally.
I think women haven't had to learn how to deal with that rejection.
You know what's so stupid too is that for every woman I've ever been seeing or dated, I have been so careful with them. And this is almost to a fault. And by almost, I mean it is to a fault. Because I was really careful with consent and the women that I interacted with. Because I thought they don't have a response. They don't have an automated response. They don't voice things as much. I remember a girl I was dating, we hooked up one night, and we were both trash. And the next morning I woke up and I was like, whoa, are you okay with everything? Was everything okay for you? I crossed a line drinking. I definitely want to make sure that you were fine. And she's like, yeah, you idiot. Everything was great. Like, remember the whole evening? And I was like, well, yes. And she was like, it was excellent. Thank you. You're stupid. And I was doing that for women. And I wasn't doing that for guys. And I'm not only have I paid the price for that, but a good friend of mine paid the price for that, and now we're not friends, and now I'm talking to you on this podcast. So it's super important.
I'm going to shoehorn something in here, and I'm taking this opportunity, and I don't mean it to be malicious, but men sometimes don't have it as easy as people think we do with a lot of this shit. A lot of pressure is put on us because we're basically, okay, women are the gatekeepers of sex.
Yeah.
But I have to carry it from beginning to end, and I have to initiate it, and I have to be watching it, and because women are bad at saying no, and they're bad at saying yes, so therefore it's like, and so what I'm getting at is that's how someone like you could treat women differently when you're having sex, because a guy will just tell me if he doesn't want to, or even worse, why wouldn't he want to have sex with me? Mm-hmm. Right? Yeah, and so it's, and I'm not trying to paint men out as victims here, but I'm just saying, like, this is one of those areas that, like, I would often get shouted down for what I just said. For what I just said, I would, and it's like, and I'm not hard done by. Women have a lot of shit they have to deal with that I'll never have to fucking deal with, but I'm just saying it's not a fucking cakewalk on this side either all the time.
Consent needs to happen with everybody.
That's right.
That's it. Yeah. That's it. And it's not just a few people. Everybody needs to talk about consent.
Yep.
Because I have been pretty much in every type of relationship under the sun.
Right.
And it comes up in all of them. Are you trans? Yeah, we still have to have that conversation. Are we in a lesbian relationship? Yeah, we still have to have that conversation. Are we a tier in an open relationship? Of course we need to have that conversation. So don't put all the burden on one person in an interaction. Both of you guys need to be having a consistent conversation with each other, and yeah, it's for everybody. It's absolutely for everybody. Don't make assumptions in the bedroom. Why do that? Assumptions in the bedroom are only going to make things worse. Why not say things directly? That's often pretty hot. I would like you to slap me. And then if you're like, I don't want to slap you, then that's fine. You just go, oh, okay. And then you do something else, because that's what it can be like.
And ladies, if the guy doesn't want to slap you, don't call him a pussy.
Don't do that. Yeah, don't call anybody a pussy.
Some guys are like, that's a bit, you might have to warm us up to that one.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. That's like 10 dates in.
Yeah.
Yeah.
10. Faggot. 3.
Oh my God. Oh my God.
One thing I will say, though, I've known a lot of bisexual women in my time.
Yes.
And I've noticed a common enough pattern that I can make a generalization.
Yep.
Bisexual women start acting differently around men than they do women in the courting and dating sense. It's really interesting. You'd think it'd be, because naively or superficially you might think, oh no, she'd be the same regardless of who she's sleeping with. But I've noticed that, so for example, I've noticed bisexual women will be very assertive and straight up with women when they're courting them or dating them. And then the mixed messagey games come out with men, though.
Yeah. I think we could have a whole nother podcast about
that kind of stuff.
What people have been trained to bleep bloop out to each other in a relationship.
Yeah.
But that's a lot of unbuilding and rebuilding in the structure of our relationships.
Yeah.
I think let's just start with, please don't rape anybody.
All right.
And then we'll get into the nuance later on.
Well, we've been talking for a while now, and we've covered quite a bit of ground.
Yeah.
Is there anything else you want to say?
I think I covered what I want to cover. I'm going to do an awkward thing and lean back to my bag.
Yeah, sure, by all means. She's leaning back to her bag, and I think, once again, I appreciate you coming on here and talking about this. It's pretty cool, and I'm glad that you trusted me enough to want to do this. I don't personally there are differences because you're a woman. Even my brain is like, well, is this like, I have to sort of go, okay, what are the differences here? And what are, like, is it like, what would I be interviewing a man in this situation right now? And yes, I would.
Yeah.
Here's the thing I do know. I'd probably face more social repercussions for interviewing. Like we've heard about some of the other people who've been accused of things in our comedy community, right? Some of them I would probably have there would be a bit more backlash for doing this right now, I think.
For sure.
And I think unfortunately, now you're approaching it differently, admittedly.
That's it. I don't know if anybody's...
Yeah.
I've been the coolest rapist to come out so far, so no, that's flippant. But no, I think I'm the only one that I know so far that's been open to process. Although I will say people that have been accused of lesser things have been open to process, and that was really interesting to see. There's a few people that came forward in the forum and just said, look, this is how I behaved. It was unkind. I created harm in another person's life, and I'm sorry, and that was pretty remarkable to see, I have to say. So that actually was good to see, but that was for smaller
inappropriate
items.
hugging, I think, was one of them.
Yeah, but there was one that was worse than that.
Oh, was there?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah,
I don't remember which one, but whatever.
So yeah, the notes that I wrote down in a therapy session were to make sure that I really clearly stated that I did something wrong, and that I don't think I didn't do anything wrong. Definitely I did something wrong, and I'm sorry, and I'm really sorry to that person, and I believe that person. Taking responsibility and showing up for the work. Give me work. I will do it. I can't undo that, so I can only do more work to make things not better, not perfect. Like, I can just make things slightly less bad.
Here's one. I'm going to issue you a challenging question.
Sure. Yep. Let's do it.
Now, this isn't just sober guy wedging his own ideology into it, but what have you done about the drinking? Because the drinking seems to be a big issue in all of this.
I didn't stop drinking entirely, but I stopped the way I drank.
Okay.
As soon as I went to therapy, 2016, I think it was the new year, maybe, is that right? After I called the suicide hotline, that was September 2015. So probably in October of 2015, I started going to therapy. And what I noticed when I went to therapy is that I kept on pausing, and that's when I would have bought the person I was talking to another drink to keep listening to me.
Right.
So that's the type of drinker I was. I also took that month off drinking and looked at when I wanted to reach for a drink, and that was a lot to do with anxiety and uncomfortableness. The answer is I still drink. I drink once a week. I don't drink the way I used to drink. I used to drink. I one day was walking home hungover, and I thought, I'm hungover every day. And that is the only reason I realized that I drank every day. I realized I was hungover every day before I realized that I drank every single day. So I stopped drinking that way pretty much after that month sober. I didn't stop drinking entirely because I am going to need so much more therapy before I can stop drinking entirely. And that sounds ugly, but that's just the truth. When you stop drinking, for anybody that's ever thinking about stopping drinking, I know you have, drinking is not the wound. Drinking is the Band-Aid that covers the wound. And so when you quit drinking, you think, I've gotten rid of the wound. And then you see the wound that you have covered for a long time, and you have to hang out with the wound. And so I spent a month hanging out with the wound, and then I called the suicide hotline. And for the record, that changed my life for the better, and everything started getting good. But I am not ready to fully break up with alcohol. That's going to take a lot more. I am totally up for not drinking to success.
Excess.
I'm totally up for
Drinking to
not
success. I want to drink to success.
Yeah, I've done that. I am not drinking to excess. I'm not drinking every day. I've completely changed the way I drink. I used to just slam things back. I will say, when I was getting ready for the first Rape is Real, a friend of mine asked if I was stressed, and I said, yeah, maybe a little. And then he said, you have only ordered doubles since you decided to do this show. And I was like, oh, because I didn't notice that. But I don't have that relationship with alcohol anymore. I still have a relationship with alcohol. Someday, when I am a superhuman like Mark Hughes, I will be able to break up with it entirely. Today is not that day.
I'm not a superhuman. My buddy and I were talking about that today because people say, I hate this. So I'll go out on a date with a girl, right? And then she finds out I'm in recovery, and she goes, oh my God, good for you, right? And I'm so proud of you. And I'm like, oh man, would you be proud of the kid who fucking finally learned to stop sticking the paperclip in the light socket? No. Right? That's all it was. I decided to stop sticking a gun in my mouth when I was, but anyway.
I'd be proud of that kid.
Okay.
Anyway, yeah. So I've changed my behavior, and it's interesting because I thought a lot about when I was accused, and I thought, okay, I've changed most of my behavior from what kind of person I was back then already. Even the way I treated people, sober or drunk, what I thought people owed me was astonishing.
So you had entitlement.
Oh my God, of course I did. That's what I'm talking about, good person that does bad things. Oh, but you have to forgive me because I'm not a bad person. I'm a good person who does bad things. And so you just think, oh, I have been through, before that, I didn't even realize, I hadn't come to terms with my own sexual assault, but I've been through a lot of shit. And so I was like, I'm traumatized. I have been through these things. And so I deserve to hurt people all of the time, and they have to forgive me. And that is not the case. If you have been through shit, you don't get to hurt people. I am sorry. That's tough to hear. You do not get to hurt people. You don't.
Yeah, and the shitty thing is in society right now, the victimhood culture, that's actually become like a very popular identity and justification for a lot of things. I mean, maybe not as extreme as what you're talking about, but you see people like, I was a victim of fill in the blank, so therefore I get to yell at you and you don't get to tell me to be quiet. It's like, whoa,
yeah.
You don't. I used to fucking rob people and shit like that because I was a victim of sexual abuse. But that doesn't matter. Yeah. Deal with your shit.
Yeah.
And you don't get to now victims create victims. Hurt people. We all know that, but it's not an excuse. It's just more of an explanation for it,
It's something right? Once you realize you're doing it,
you can't. You're not allowed to use it as an excuse
absolutely
anymore. Yeah.
Combat it.
Yeah.
Combat it, and that's different from saying like, I don't know, I'm this type of person, so I might relapse. Warning people,
yeah.
I might relapse, and this will happen. But that doesn't mean you get to say I'm this type of person, so this is an uneven friendship where I abuse you and you are okay with it.
Right.
And that's not to stigmatize mental health or any other types of health. Everybody in my family has some unique mental health quality that we all deal with all the time. And sometimes I've had family members inflict pain on me, and I know it's not them. I know it's something happening inside of them, and they're fighting a really, really hard battle. But that is different from saying something bad happened to me, so buckle up, I'm going to hurt you. That's not fair.
No. Take responsibility for your shit.
Take responsibility for your shit. And if you do, other people will help you with your shit. Man, like, People will help you once you come forward about it and just say, this is my pain, this is my process. Can you help me? And either they'll say, yes, I can, or maybe they'll say, I am fighting my own battles. I don't have the strength right now. That's an okay answer too. Find the people that can support you. Be good to those people. And if you do mess up, because everybody messes up in little ways, apologize. Be genuinely sorry for doing harm. For sure.
Cool. Well, do you want to end it there?
I think so.
I think so? Yeah. Those are your closing thoughts. Yeah.
Yes.
Alrighty. Heather Jordan Ross, thank you for joining me.
Thank you for doing this.
Very tough discussion. I admire it. I applaud it.
Thank you.
And just so you know, I'm about to turn the recording device off, and I do have pepper spray. So don't get any fucking ideas. What are you going to do for the rest of the day?
I mean, I'm not going to say not drink.
Okay. So you might end up having a drink. You said you're going to some...
Under three. Under three drinks.
Well, thanks for joining us once again. This has been Pulling the Trigger. Pulling the Trigger is sponsored by our friends at Jackal Events. Jackal Events is a Vancouver-based event organization company specializing in political events. Please find Pulling the Trigger on Soundcloud and iTunes and hit subscribe. If you'd like to follow me and my antics, whether it's comedy, storytelling, fringe shows, some motivational speaking, you can follow me at Mark Hughes Comic on both Instagram and Facebook, and Twitter. And if you like what I'm doing, I don't mind taking donations, and you can do so at www.patreon.com/Mark Hughes Comic. Don't forget that Comedy Shocker is a quarterly dark and dirty comedy show. Please like that page, Comedy Shocker, on both Instagram and Facebook, and keep staying tuned or tuned in, or however you want to put it, to Pulling the Trigger, where I will be continually interviewing interesting, unusual, and controversial people. Peace out, homies.